up, guys? Welcome back to Diesel Creek. Today we're going to be working on this monument in my driveway that is my pull behind vibratory roller. Now if you guys haven't seen the previous videos on this, go ahead and either click up in the corner or down in the descriptions the link to the playlist, all the videos on this roller. The quick backstory: I bought this thing for $200 in the middle of a field, had trees growing out of it and everything, cut it out of there, had a 4-cylinder Wisconsin on it at the time. Did a little bit of work to the Wisconsin, got it going, used it on a few jobs, not a whole lot. Boom, head exploded on the Wisconsin. Way too expensive to get parts for the Wisconsin, plus it's a fuel hog. So I was able to scare up this 4-cylinder Kubota diesel in a junkyard for not a lot of money. Pretty cheap, and I was able to get it going. The injection pump was seized up on it and a few other things, but it runs real good right now. I've got everything rigged up and converted over to work on this roller. And we just have some finishing touches to do today. So what we have left to work on here is the exhaust, mounting our permanent fuel tank. This is just temporary. Removing the 12 miles of battery leads that we've got here and shortening up that harness. And we're going to build an automatic throttle advance for it. See, this is a big centrifugal clutch out here, and the engine can be running at an idle. And, well, without the clutch engaged, you can rev the engine to the moon, it doesn't matter. But once you engage this over center clutch here, that puts power to this thing. This is a big centrifugal clutch, and after the engine hits a certain RPM, this thing starts spinning, which in turn spins the counterweight down inside the big drum down here, which will pulverize the ground. So the thought is you put an automatic throttle on it. That way you can have just a long lead on it, stick it on whatever machine you're pulling this thing with, and be cruising around. And when you get to the spot where you want to start compacting, you just flick the switch and the engine revs up, the vibratory kicks in, and you roll to town and kick it out when you want to. So as I said, first thing we're going to be working on here is an exhaust. So this is the exhaust that came off of the like industrial cart or Cushman cart that this engine came out of. And I've had this thing mounted up here just for testing before, not in any particular orientation. And this muffler is super quiet, which I'm a big fan of. You know, big loud diesels are nice for about 20 minutes, and then you're like, okay, I'm sick of this. So I want to put it sticking like so, so it shoots out the side here. You know, no harm, no foul. If you're back here working the controls or running the wheels up and down while it's running, anything like that, you're not going to have exhaust blowing in your face or choking you. Trouble is, with the pieces we got here to work with, is we're about, I don't know, 3-4 inches too tall this way. So I need to shorten this thing up. And I was going to just cut it here and weld it back together, but I actually got to looking at the muffler orientation here, and we can just make a slice right here and 180 the muffler, so that we would gain all this space here. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. So the flange on this exhaust is thicker right here, so I'm going to cut it right above the weld here so that we've got the most meat to weld it back on with. This real thin metal's, you know, tricky if you don't do it every day, which I don't. I've always been better with thicker metals, so I'm going to cut it where it's thickest and weld it back on where it's thickest. Should make it the easiest. There we go. Oh yeah, we got some serious meat there to weld to. I like that. Cut turned out pretty decent. I'm gonna go ahead and just take the flapper wheel and clean up the edges on both of these. Give them slight bevels so they're ready to weld. Sometimes you just wish you had a third hand. Go ahead and tack that. Alright, I just double checked everything. It all looks good. Let's go ahead and buzz it in. Grinder and paint makes me the welder. I ain't. Funny thing about it is I actually did go to school for welding after high school. And I can stick weld pretty darn good, but never really got good at MIG. I don't know why. Don't get me wrong, I can MIG something together and it's not going to break just like this, but never really just looks like glass like some people's do. Helps if you ground the workpiece. Take two. Ooh. Our ground is angry. Wowzers. Take 3, 4. That'll do, pig. That'll do. Now the moment of truth. Will it work? Will it fit in the hole? These questions we've been asking our entire lives are about to be answered. Ooh, we have clearance. There we go. Look at that. Now I just need to work out some sort of bracing for the end of it out here, and we're going to put a 45 cut on this thing to keep the rainwater out, hopefully anyway. Might even end up having to cut it off and put a 90 on it. But let's go ahead and fire it up and hear it with a muffler for the first time. That'll be nice, huh? A lot of times you guys can't tell the difference between before and after, you know, how loud the sound really is on camera. It makes it tough. So I'm going to play it right now before the muffler. And here we are with the new muffler. So much quieter. Alright, now I know these old belts aren't in the best shape, but we're going to go ahead and throw our cover over them so that we can fab up a mount for our muffler now. obviously we need to have some way to support this weight out here. All that weight on that exhaust manifold will snap it over time, or could. So we'll get something to support this weight. So here's my simple exhaust mount. Now we want to rubber isolate this thing because it is going to move independently from this frame that this thing is bolted to. So I got that deal there. This is just a hunk I cut out of the sidewall of a tire, and a little metal tab here, and some holes drilled. And we're just going to lift this thing up to take a little bit of weight off of it, buzz that tab right on right there, and run a bolt through it, clamp it down, and she is going to be nice and isolated. And that also is up against this thing here, so it can't let the muffler bang into this shield. Good enough for my liking. Simple as that. Bolt through here. Now the idea so much with the bolt here isn't like hanging on the bolt, but clamping it. See, we're going to use these big washers here, and they're going to clamp all that surface area together, and that should hold it down real good. Beautiful. I'm digging that. Good enough. Okay, so I'm not the best at electrical anything. So this diagram is as much for me as it is for you guys to understand what we're doing here. So this is our push, well, this is just a pull solenoid, okay, and this is what we're using to pull the throttle on the engine and make it rev up so it'll start vibrating. On the solenoid, we've got 3 wires coming out here. We've got a ground, we've got a pull, and we've got a hold. So when you want to use this solenoid, you have to get 12 volts on the pull side as well as 12 volts on the hold side, but the pull side is only momentary. The pull voltage has to go away as soon as it gets to the hold side, because this plunger will suck back in and then it transfers over onto the hold side. And if you leave the pull side energized, it will burn up the solenoid. Solenoid, I know everybody always yells at me for pronouncing it wrong. Solenoid. Anywho, so the only way I can figure out how to wire this thing up to be remotely actuated without having to get really involved and do relays and all kind of stuff that is above my knowledge is a switch. So there are switches out there that have 2 poles, 1 momentary and then 1 latching. They're kind of hard to come by. They're not something that any store is going to stock, and I want to get this thing done right now. And they're also relatively expensive for, you know, a regular switch. Something like this that's just an on-off, you know, something like that's only a couple bucks. But I was looking at like $15, $18 for one of these double pole, half momentary, half latching switches. So anyway, what I came up with, we got a battery here, 12 volts into the switch, and then, you know, you got to have your double pole out for pull and hold. Anyway, so what I came up with, just something I would be able to get off the shelf around here, was a generic lawnmower ignition switch. So this is just a regular like key switch out of your riding lawnmower. So this switch has 3 positions. You've got off, run, and start. That fulfills all our needs here for pull and hold. And so on the back here, there's a lot more switches going on here, or a lot more plugs than we need, but they are all stamped. So We got a B, an S, and an R, which I'm assuming stands for battery, start, and run. So that's going to be repurposed for us. Instead of run and start, what that's going to be is your 12 volts in will be your battery, and the hold is going to be on our run, and the start is going to be on our pull. So now this is going to be our remote that we're going to have up on the machine pulling the roller. And so when you want to turn the vibrator on and throttle up the engine, what you're going to do is go to run, and that's not going to do anything. You're going to have to go past run to the start, and that'll suck that plunger in on our solenoid, and then it'll automatically spring the key switch back to the run position, which will take the voltage away from the pull and leave it on the hold, and then it'll keep the solenoid activated. And when we want to throttle down, all I have to do is kick the key switch back to off, and the throttle will release and it will idle back down. Alright, so here we find ourselves. I just spent the last couple hours cleaning up the wiring here, getting everything neat and tucked away, and I've got our key switch rigged up here. That's what those wires are there coming in. Here's our key switch right here. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. It's right in theory, and I should have seen this coming, but this little key switch will not carry enough amperage to run the pull function on this solenoid. That takes a lot of juice, I guess, to suck this plunger back. Now, watch what happens when we try it. This part here should fly back in like that. So that should be our latching, and that should pull it in there. You can see it's trying, but it doesn't have enough amperage, I guess, to pull that in there. Now it will, as I just showed, hold it there. Apparently it doesn't take a whole lot of amps to hold that thing, and you know, I can't release it. I can't overpower the magnet, and it does work. So the theory's all there. Unfortunately, our cheap little switch here just can't carry the amps. But the show must go on, right? So what I've got here is less than ideal, but it will function. I have a toggle switch rated at 50 amps and a push button switch rated at 60 amps. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I could make this all work with a lot less amperage stuff by using relays. I just don't feel like messing with all that and wrapping my head around that much wiring. I really just despise wiring. So this one's actually waterproof too. I already had it out of there, removed the cap. Anyway, we're gonna get these rigged up and hopefully that should work. Alrighty, wowzers. Well, in real time, this is the next day here. I ended up, I got my switches all wired up here, and I ended up having to go get a completely new cable because the old one that I was trying to use here was just like an old extension cord or something, and I don't know, there must be some corrosion in it or something, or that was 14 gauge, maybe it just couldn't hold the current. This is 12 gauge, and when we press our button here, it works. So we flip our switch to on, bam, and now she's accelerated. You want to idle it back down, you flip your switch, back to idle. So we can button all this up now. This cover, I did have it drilled for the ignition. I'm going to get a new one of those eventually. I'm not going to make a special trip for that, but we'll get a new one of those so we don't have a big hole in the middle there. And yeah, pretty excited. All right, let's go ahead and try this out. All I have left to do in this department is just get my digital tack out and get this engine tuned into the right RPM for our vibratory. I forget what the engine speed is, but it's written on a plate down here. Oh yeah, that's gonna look snazzy, huh? Okay, well, I just got this thing back from the neighbor's place. I took it up there because he's got a garage he uses as a paint shop, and I said, hey man, could I paint this thing in your garage since the weather's become too cold to really do it outside now? He said, oh yeah, sure, bring it up. And I was gonna go up and do it myself because I knew what I wanted here, and I wasn't trying to make this thing a showpiece by any means, but I was gonna make it look pretty good. And he thought I just wanted to rust proof it basically, and he did me a solid, or he thought he was. You know, I'm not mad at him. I mean, I didn't really explain to him, and he went ahead and just painted it for me with the paint that I had taken up there. And he kind of didn't do the greatest job. He brushed it on in places and then sprayed over it, and there's brush strokes all over it, which I'm not very happy with, but I'm not mad at him at all. It's just, I was gonna actually make the thing look pretty decent. I've spent enough time working on this thing that I wanted it to look good still in a few years, but it is what it is. It'll keep it from rusting over, and it's just a piece of heavy equipment that's going to sit around. Honestly, it's not really going to get used super frequently. So all we need to do now is finish putting it back together, and we can try this thing out for the first time. Okay, everything is mounted and it is officially done. Or officially. Somebody always picks on my grammar in the comments. Anyway, it's officially done. The last thing I'm going to do right now is, this is one of those digital tachometers. And what you do is you attach this reflective tape to the pulley on the crankshaft, and then shine this thing at it while it's running, and it'll tell you the minimum, maximum, and average RPM. There's our reflective tape. Okay, so I know these plates on the side of this roller are hard to read here, but according to these, our engine idle speed should be between 800 and 900 RPM, and our engine speed under load should be 2100 RPM, which should equate to our vibrator shaft speed equaling 3600 RPM, or VPM, excuse me. So I don't have a way to test this, but I can test this guy here. And to get to 2100 RPM, we're going to have to do this. So our resting idle right here looks like this with this spring. Okay, and that's just barely snug onto the throttle arm. When we engage our throttle solenoid, that pulls back and that spring stretches out quite a bit. So we only have so much throw with the solenoid. So to get this thing up to the 2100 RPM we need, I'm going to stick a zip tie through there while that thing is engaged. I'm going to stick a zip tie through that spring and start clicking it shut until we get to our 2100 RPM, and then it should be good. It'll spring open till the stretch of the zip tie, and that's it. Okay, we have this thing out here at the farm. It's ready to take on its first compacting job. As a lot of you guys know and been following the channel for a while, I put my driveway, well, half of my driveway in this past winter and summer here. I got a lot done, and it's way out there, it stops. And I've been running on this part of it, you know, with vehicle traffic and stuff up until about my truck there. And then past that, it never really gets run on yet because it doesn't have a destination. So I'm gonna get the tractor hooked up to the roller here, and we're gonna go ahead and start compacting away. You'll really be able to see a big difference out here on this piece that hasn't been tracked on much. It should settle that rock down quite a bit, keep it nice and level, versus, you know, running in with vehicle traffic. Yeah, it gets packed in where the wheels go, but it doesn't pack it really ideally. It packs it on the edges, and the middle doesn't get packed, and that can actually cause the mud underneath to pump up, so the mud comes up through the middle basically. And I haven't had that happen here, luckily, but we're just now getting into the wet season, so we'll try and avoid that. And we'll take the roller right down the center of this one several times. We'll make several passes, just hitting just the middle here, so that should keep the middle pushed back down, hopefully. Thing of beauty right there, boys. All right, I think we should be ready to roll. Get it? Dad joke. Anyway, I got the key here. We're gonna get this thing fired up, but first I'm gonna tell you the operating procedure, just so everybody knows. You guys have spent enough time looking at this thing, I figure you probably wanna know how to use it. So we get this thing hooked up to a tractor in this instance, so we stretched out our remote throttle lead. I stuck it up there on the fender where it's easy access while we're operating the tractor. Checked all our fluids, that's ready to go. So I pulled the wheels up, and I believe you guys have seen me do that before, but to do that all you do is push this valve up or down and run the electric motor that runs the wheels here. And that's just about it. So you lift the wheels, greased everything, we're ready to go. Last thing we need to do will be after the engine starts, but I'll just tell you now. I could even do it now, it doesn't really matter, but this is the clutch lever here. This engages your centrifugal clutch that's down in here. So we'll go ahead and engage that over center. And let's fire this thing up. Maybe. I'm having problems with this stupid little starter relay. Gonna have to get another one of those. These connections still yet are gonna get tucked up underneath here, but I just pulled that out to fiddle with it. Maybe it'll start one of these days. I'll just have to override the starter relay for now and get another one of those tomorrow. Forgot to turn the key on. All right, it's running. Should be ready to go. Let's try it out. Well, we're back to shut down that quick. First time out with a piece of equipment like this. Just still kind of working some bugs out of it. I realized after a couple minutes that the electric fan for the radiator wasn't kicking on here, and we were up to like 200, 210, something like that. So I shut her down, bring it up here. I'm trying to diagnose why the fan, I know the fan works because it used to kick on when I'd be testing this thing out in the driveway. So either the solenoid is giving us trouble or the temp sensor. So trying to diagnose which one that is. So here's proof of concept on the fan if I bypass it. So that thing's working fine. All right, well, that's another task taken care of, I hope. What it was, see, I just put this terminal on here now, and I don't need to connect it to anything. I just used a ring terminal because that's all I had with me. But there was 2 black wires over here coming out, and I guess they used to go together, and in the process of me tidying up all the wiring on this thing before I left the house, I had cut some of the old harness that was for that cart thing off, and so this leg here actually still goes to ground, and this one here I guess used to tie into it further down, and I had cut out that joint, so now this guy was just out here in the wind, so the solenoid had no ground. So now it should work just fine. All right, everything's back in action. Let's make sure this radiator fan works, huh? Well, the coolant fan must be working because we're still staying right below 180, and that was running it pretty hard there for a minute. It's doing a good job taking the hump out of the middle of the driveway too. I'm happy about that. No, the fan was actually running right now. Good deal. Yeah, the fan appears to be working good. Every time I came back and checked the gauge, we were still right at 180, but the fan was not on, so it must have just shut off every time I checked it, but it's running this time. And yeah, this thing's working perfectly, best I can tell. The only trouble I'm noticing here, dun dun dun, we've acquired a leak, and I can tell just by touching it here, it's nice and clear. That has got to be our 90 weight from this gear case here, which is very unfortunate. I actually put a new seal in this thing whenever I installed it, but it's obviously not working. So anyway, I got the driveway rolled in and it looks beautiful here. I know the leaves make it really hard to tell, but it did a great job taking the hump out of the middle, as I mentioned before. It actually smoothed out some of the small depressions and potholes that were forming. And if you've ever graded roads or even dirt, whatever it is, it always is much easier to grade after you've rough graded and then compacted, and then you can come back and final grade, because it makes the depressions show up so much better. You know, because if you're cutting virgin ground and filling, you know, now you have fill right next to virgin ground, so it looks level, but after it's compacted, that loose fill will pack more than that virgin ground, so you end up with dips and doodles if you don't ever compact it. So it's really helpful from a grading aspect to rough grade, compact, and then finish grade. So this is looking nice. Eventually I'm going to get a millings, like asphalt millings, to top my whole driveway here, and I might be doing that soon, so we'll definitely be using the roller for that when that happens. But ultimately, like I said, I'm happy with it. The only thing it's going to need, starter relay. Definitely going to need that soon. I noticed too that this fuel tank is kind of losing a little bit of fuel. I can't tell if it's coming out the top here where this pins through it, or if it's leaking around the threads, but I might try to look into something to do about that here. It's not losing much, but it is just running everywhere, and it's gonna get all dusty and dirty and look like crap. All right, there she is, resting in her new home until I have to call on her. But I do believe, other than a starter relay, she is ready. So that marks the end of a video and the end of a project that has taken, 2 years, maybe closer to 3. I don't know, but it's always good to scratch one off the list. I get comments every once in a while. Does this guy ever finish anything? Yeah, but you know, not the stuff I get to cover for YouTube. That's more hobby stuff, so the hobbies always come second. So I get a lot of stuff done, just not always stuff I can record. So whenever I can, I take you guys with me, and I'll appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. So if you like the video, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.